Good morning. I'm EZRAH here to walk you through today's burning issues and the biggest stories. This is the Manila Times. The Philippines' current inflation rate is one of the highest in Asia. On top of this, Filipino workers have to make ends meet with an extremely low basic wage. The Employers Confederation of the Philippines, or ECA, said that the 150 pesos wage increase still needs to be consulted and further discussed with the National Economic Development Authority, among other concerned agencies. How are Filipinos able to cope with these challenges? Here to share his insights is socio-economic think tank, IBON Foundation's Executive Director, Jose Enrique Sunny Africa. Welcome to the Manila Times, sir. Here to share his insights is socio-economic think tank, IBON Foundation's Executive Director, Jose Enrique Sunny Africa. Welcome to the Manila Times, Sir Sunny.
Morning. Thank you for the invitation. Hi, EZRAH.
Yes, sir. Thank you for granting us this interview. Sir, the private sector opposes the 150 pesos minimum wage increase nationwide. So before this, 750 minimum wage increase across the board was proposed in the lower house, and it may not see the light of day. So do you think Filipinos can still live on with the current inflation and low wages?
Unfortunately, this narrative of Filipinos being resilient is quite true. There's no doubt Filipinos will do whatever they need to do to survive, to get by on a daily basis, and they will survive. But I think we're way beyond that point that it's just about survival. Right now, it's about justice. It's about actually the work the employers doing as much as they can to help Filipinos. And more than that, it's about the government doing everything it can to help ordinary Filipinos. So I have no doubt Filipinos will survive with whatever low wages or low earnings they can for those not in wage work. But the quality of life is going to be very poor, and that's unacceptable, I think, right now, especially after, we're still trying to sort of get up from 2 to 3 years of some really excessive lockdown. So a wage hike now is so justified. I think it helps ordinary Filipino families. It helps workers. It actually also helps the economy. I think the recent GDP figures also affirm how important a wage hike is for economic growth.
Yes, sir. And the IBON Foundation has released more data that the Philippines does in fact has the highest inflation rate with 6.6. So that's already an improvement from the past month, 7.6% inflation rate. But then we're still the highest because close to us is 5.5%. Right. And that's the inflation rate from Singapore, I think. Singapore's 5.5% and Indonesia's 5.3% in inflation. And also you mentioned that workers' productivity increased this year, but the wages aren't exactly meeting those productivity.
Actually, that's one of the, I think, things we have to keep reminding ourselves. They're actually laws. I mean, apart from the constitutional exhortation to give a living wage, apart from the NWBC itself defining what a living wage is, and it's not a poverty wage, even according to the NWBC's own guidelines. Even the labor code has parameters for when wage hikes should be given. If you look at the standard measures for giving a wage hike, increase in productivity, rising cost of living, needs of families, and actually even the supposed fair return to investment of employers, actually all those conditions are met for workers to get a much bigger wage hike right now. And I think it's so important to stress the Philippines actually has, contrary to what ECOP is saying, and I think even some policymakers are saying, the Philippines does not have high wage rates in ASEAN. If you look at the lowest minimum wage rates in every country, because we always have to look at the list of our brethren, the Philippines has a third lowest minimum wage in ASEAN. It's only it's only higher than in Myanmar and Laos. So I think with the third highest inflation in Asia, in Southeast Asia, with the third lowest minimum wages in Southeast Asia, and the capacity of employers now to pay a much higher wage than they are currently making, I think the conditions are there, the urgency is there, that the moral imperative is there to give higher wages right now.
Sir, you mentioned that the living wage exactly is not at par with the current minimum wage. So how can the government close this gap?
Wages are a political choice. I know there's always a lot of argumentation about it's turned by the economy, by how far productivity is. But beyond a certain point, wages are set politically. And I think even given the current more or less backward industrial conditions of the Philippines, we can afford to give much higher wages. And the main thing stopping wages from increasing is no longer economic conditions because there are enough profits to be had to be distributed. It's the political intervention of government that is lacking. And I think the fact that wages have been so low, did you know the minimum wage right now in the NCR? It's as low as it was in 1989. So I think that says a lot about how the regional wage boards in the last 30, 35 years have not really done their job, at least, of maintaining decent wages for workers. And I think since it's a political choice, the government should make a political stand. If historically it has always taken the side of employers and put the burden of proof on workers to say, can employers afford this? The simple expedient position of government saying, employers, show us that you cannot afford a wage hike. I think that small shift will, give way to the economic conditions that employers can give a much higher wage. Workers deserve a much higher wage as long as the government takes a political stand for those actually are in much greater need right now.
Sir, do you agree with the across the board minimum wage increase, with
Mm.
the nationwide minimum wage increase? If yes, how much? Is 150 pesos enough?
Well, clearly, 150 pesos is far from enough. The current family living wage, by our computation, inflating the last official estimate made by NWPC so long ago in September 2008, it's 1,160 pesos daily. So the highest minimum wage in Metro Manila is 570 pesos. The 150 pesos leaves a huge yawning gap with the family living wage. But of course, it is actually going to be a big step forward, especially from the practice of wage hikes being just 10, 15, 20, 30 pesos. The 150 pesos across the board, not in a graduated manner, is actually very doable. Their last estimates, even using data from the PSA for 2020, when profits were very low, 150 peso across the board wage hike would have been on average just a 14% cut in employer profits, which means that if they accepted that 14% cut in profits and did not pass on the wage hike, it would not even be inflationary. So for us, the economic conditions are there, especially, we've been supposedly with the recovering, reopening since last year, with profits much higher now. That small 150 peso across the board wage hike immediately done across all enterprises is, I think, very doable for especially small, medium, and large enterprises. The government may need to step in a little bit for micro enterprises, but even then, our computation is it's just about a 36 billion peso wage subsidy needed to make sure that all workers in all establishments covered by DOLE's supervision can actually give a 100 peso across the board wage hike.
So I think Gabriela Party List's Representative
Mm.
Arlene Rosa's proposal of 750 pesos
Mm.
is more accurate, it's more acceptable
Mm.
in terms of like you've said, the living wage here is 1,160 pesos. So I think 750
Mm.
pesos wage increase is more needed than the 150 pesos, sir.
Actually, the 70 pesos was computed because of the wage cap being felt right now. If you go, of course, on an enterprise by enterprise basis or by size, there is a discrepancy between what wages are being received by firms. The 750 peso tries to assure that the family living wage is achieved for all workers nationwide. But actually, in practice, the average daily basic pay right now, I think in the Philippines, about 540 pesos or so. So to be literal about it, it only will take about 620 pesos to reach the family living wage for April 2023. But again, because of our legislative process, it's going to take so long. By the time that the 750 pesos might even be considered, much less passed, I think that will actually give some allowance for the family living wage when hopefully that kind of law is passed.
You agree with across the board minimum
Mm-mm.
increase, and how much is that, sir? Like with your opinion.
Well, just for that to be practical about it, if the current wage bill in the Senate right now, 150 pesos, has hurdled the committee level, we have full support for that. We would argue it should be a great graduated increase. We argue it should be across the board, immediately nationwide for all firms in all of all sizes. For the 12% of employees in micro firms, the government can step in with some wage subsidies to make sure that they also benefit. But small, medium, and large firms can give that 150 for just on average about a 14% cut in their profits. So we're fully in support of that. If the technical working group, the Senate, sees it in its, in good conscience, give what workers need to maybe it's fine halfway, maybe not 750, maybe 375. Even that will leave employers with the majority of their profits still. I mean, by our computation, even at halfway point of 375 pesos would just take out about 1/3 of employer profits to be distributed to millions of minimum wage earners.
Do you have any thoughts on how the government should proceed with the current economic conditions in the country?
Well, for us right now, it's so clear. The biggest reason that the economy is slowing is because household consumption spending is slowing. That is slowing because Filipinos don't have money in their pockets. Now, if the government thinks that it's enough to rely on exports to boost growth or invest or infrastructure investments, that's not going to be enough. The global economy is slowing, which will dampen exports. Infrastructure investments, a big part of spending infrastructure is spent abroad, not even on construction workers or local employment. So for the government to have more bang for its buck, for the government to actually pump prime the economy, genuinely stimulate it, putting more money in families' pockets, which will be spent in the Philippines, not on imported, construction materials or vacations abroad by wealthy families, putting more money in people's pockets through a wage hike and through emergency cash assistance, that will actually stimulate the economy much more than the current infrastructure export-oriented attitude of the government.
I like what you said there, sir. Increasing the wages and increasing the buying power of Filipino consumers would do more for the economy. Thank you so much for your insights, IBON Foundation's Executive Director, Sir Sunny Africa.